Hey everyone, glad you could join us for our first webinar of 2021. Can everyone hear me okay? Maybe just give me a quick heads up, +1, something in the chat pane. Looks like Richard says we're all good. Carol, everyone says we're all good. Perfect. So really glad everyone could join us. If this is your first time joining one of our webinars, to introduce myself, I'm Mark Stoddard. I run sales and marketing here at ClientSuccess. And really excited to welcome Emilia D'Anzica, founder of Growth Molecules, on today. Emilia, really glad you could join us.
Thank you for having me, Mark.
So excited to have you. How was your holiday? How was your New Year's? I guess it's probably too late to be asking how's your New Year's. We're way too far into the new year at this point, right?
I think so, but you know what? I keep working towards those New Year goals, so those
Right.
are not far behind.
I'm just proud of myself for saying this is our first webinar of 2021. I finally have dropped the 2020 in my mindset. So that's my win for today. So, well, cool. So we'll go ahead and get started. A little bit of housekeeping. Just so everyone's aware, we're going to be recording the session. So afterwards, I'll share the recording. We'll share the slides. If you have any questions that come up during the kind of presentation portion, pop them in the chat pane. I'll be monitoring the chat pane as always. And so what we'll do is we'll kind of share content for the first half, and then we'll have a little bit more of a Q&A in the second half. And with that, maybe I'll go ahead and get started. The first thing I always like to say at the top of these is every time we have one of these, we have a bunch of new folks who don't know anything about client success. And so first thing I want to do is I want to introduce you to Client Success, tell you who we are, what we're all about, why we like to do these sessions. And for a lot of you, you might be familiar with kind of other customer success platforms. And when you think of Client Success, what I hope you think of is that we are the easiest to use, easiest to implement, complete customer success solution that you're going to find. And so we're going to help your CSMs do everything they need to drive customer success, better onboarding, adoption, renewals, growth, anything that your customer success team needs to provide a great customer experience. Take insights from your customers, roll them up to your leadership team, collaborate on behalf of customers. Of course, as we're all trying to do, moving toward better net retention, better growth. Again, always with a focus on ease of use, usability, fast time to value. And so you see here on the slide, we're a leader on G2. And what I find is that about over half of our G2 reviews talk about ease of use, usability. And those are reviews directly from customers. And so I'll give you maybe one or two examples. So Fran, she's a great customer of ours. She says in her review, I like how easy it is to use, how simple the layout is. It doesn't take very long to get new starters up to speed. And that's so important because, adoption is so much easier when the product's not overly complicated. I could give you more and more all day, but we know there's other solutions out there. And our advice is if you're tired of, let's call it overly complicated systems that have kind of perpetual rollouts, come talk with us. We'd love to show you what ease of use is all about in the customer success game. So those are my bills paid. If you want to talk to me, talk to my team, find us at clientsuccess.com. Email me directly. I'm Mark with a K at Client Success, easy to find. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Emilia. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and turn it over to you. Emilia, you can go ahead and start sharing.
All right.
And like I said, I'm gonna monitor the chat pane. And if you have any questions, comments, I'd love to just hear where everyone's calling in from. It looks like, Christina's from Chicago. I see Klaus, he's there. He's a perpetual, he's a repeat attendee, I think from Denmark, London, Florida, Colorado, Toronto, Berlin. Awesome that we have a real international crowd.
Some Canadians.
Exactly. We got the Canadians. We're all good to go. So, well, cool. So I'll let you run with it. And like I said, I'm here to help. But let's get started.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Mark, and the whole Client Success team for having me. I'm super excited to talk about this topic, and how Mark and I came to decide on it is because we had an inauguration yesterday. And just like the president is putting together his 100-day plan, he's actually, I think, already announced a lot of it. I thought it would be fitting to talk about why when I've built in my past and when I work with clients, why a 100-day plan makes sense. So the first thing that a 100-day plan can help you do is not get lost in the weeds, because often as leaders, we're just thrown in to the fire and we forget to start building from a strategic perspective. And that means putting in place a business goal that you can all work towards. So my first piece of advice is cut out the noise and focus on building that plan. Now I want to ask the team, because this is going to be interactive, for everyone who is on the call, how many of you have built a 90-day plan or a 100-day plan for 2021?
See, I'll let folks start filtering in. I got first one, I got a nope, I got a yes, I got an in progress. So it looks like it's a miss to some extent, a bunch of yeses, some nopes. Yeah, yes, no, in progress, doing it now, work in
Great.
progress. Yes, but it all got blown up at the end of the year. So yeah, it sounds like it's a mix.
Okay, good. Well, I hope that you're able to have some key takeaways today that you can start implementing. If you've already built a plan or if you're in progress, you can have actionable takeaways. So the first thing I want to talk about are common blind spots, not only that my clients have as a customer success consultant, but blind spots that I've had in my 20-year career in the SaaS world. Then I'll dive into a customer success 100-day plan that you can implement. You're getting a recording of this today, so there are slides that you can actually start using immediately. And then why you should update these plans on a regular cadence. And what does regular cadence even mean? So let's dive into it. First, your blind spots. I always think that when I've worked with leaders or I've done this myself, that this is how you fail really quickly. And that is not implementing a process by first understanding the product and the customer need. That also means in the current processes and the team. When you start working with a team that maybe you've inherited, for example, and you start rolling out a process and you haven't built their trust yet, suddenly that process is going to fail. So you really want to take a moment, a first month, and really understand if your company has a certification program, put yourself in that program. And just like companies like Drift, they have all of their employees work as a support manager when they start, whether there's VP or a customer success manager, they're working on the front lines as a support manager. So really take that time to really understand your product. Secondly, you need technology to implement a playbook. So many times I've seen companies try to roll out process, but it's all over the place. It's not actionable. You don't have reporting to really show the insights to drive your decision making. And that can come back to hurt what your plans are for the team, for the customer, and for the year.
And I find that such a fine line, because some folks will wait too long to even think about their plan until they have technology, and or some folks, like you're saying, they just try to put it in place without anything. And so it's a fine line, I find, that a lot of folks walk. And it's oftentimes important to have a little bit of a plan so you know what the technology needs to do, but not wait so long that your plan's already out the door before you get any technology in place.
Yes, and Mark, when we get to the final section of this presentation, I'm going to talk about the technology piece and what you should be really thinking about when you're guiding your team. And so that's the third piece, is companies or leaders, they put together a plan, but I often don't see a budget. And if I see a budget, a huge void that I immediately call out is the lack of enablement. It's great if you have technology, it's great if you have process, but if you don't have an enablement plan for your team, then suddenly you're blaming the technology as not being good enough, or something's wrong with your team, but is something really wrong with them, or have you failed to enable them with proper education and time to really learn the skill sets and the technology that you're rolling out?
Sure.
So measuring success, no matter what you put together, a strategy, it has to have a goal in place, and your customer voice needs to be part of it. I love this stat from Bain and Company. They say that 80% of companies believe they're delivering superior experiences, but when you talk to customers, or when I'm working with clients and I'm building playbooks, I always send a survey to the customer success team, and I ask them for feedback. And often they admit, look, we're not delivering exceptional experience to our customers. And that's when you can really start building a playbook that's actionable. So make sure before you start measuring your success or putting process in place, you really understand what is superior experience for your clients and for your team. So this is why I think we're all here today, the how and the why. And you have to start with a framework. I didn't really know much about frameworks until I joined BrightEdge, where the founders of the company come from the world of Salesforce. And my manager or my leader was a huge advocate of the Mark Benioff V2 Mom. And so every quarter we put one together and then we reflected on it. And that's why 100 days is so important. I'll dive deeper into the 100 days in a moment. But what we've been using at Growth Molecules, and one of my partners, Paul Reeves, and I developed this one-page strategic plan, is really starting with your clients and your team, your executives, and really understanding what is that one goal that you really want to achieve over the next 100 days. How are you going to communicate it to your executives, to your team, and to your clients? How are you going to operationalize this playbook? And then where are the different relationships that you need to develop to really make this strategy successful? If you're building a strategy and you have goals in place and you need engineering's help and products help to make it successful, then you better start building those relationships in the first 100 days. Because without something like a framework, then your execution will not actually happen, no matter how great your plan is. So make sure when you're building a framework, if you choose to use one of these, make sure that it's transparent, easily accessible to your company. When I'll again use BrightEdge as the example, every single leader, whether you were a director, a VP, or had a C title, we all had a V2 Mom. It was in a drive, and I could log in and see what engineering's V2 Mom was, what products was, and the customer success one broken down by team. Now, these
The other thing I think about with those frameworks is you always want to make sure that not only are they transparent, but they're talked about frequently. So oftentimes I see a company that puts that framework together. Great, it's on the drive, it's on the wiki, it's in the drawer, and we're going to pull it out at our next planning meeting and forget about everything that happened in the 100 days in between them. So that's the other thing that I think is extremely important on that.
Yes, and with the last company where I was leading the team, once we had built our plan together, we went through it together as a team on Thursdays, and then on Friday at the all hands, we updated the team on where we were at in terms of progress with our strategy for that particular quarter. So it was definitely all hands on deck. We were all aligned, and we knew that, we'll go into it, we had executive alignment. The executive team had signed off on it at the beginning of every quarter, and everyone was accountable. So from the finance head, who had given us a budget, who had helped us make sure that we were going to be able to be accountable for ourselves, and they were going to support us. That was really important, for example. And the team enablement. Anytime you have a strategy that your team is behind, that has helped you build it instead of you announcing it to them, you suddenly have a team who is more enthusiastic, wants to have an impact, wants to be part of the success of that strategy, and they're eager to learn if you're rolling out significant new processes. And then what I really think is important as a leader, you are pulled into so many different directions. You have Slack messages, you have emails you can't keep up with, you have client fires that you're trying to put out, and you're trying to build a team. So your calendar is potentially full of interviews. So having a strategy that you can look at every day, once a week, and really block out time, make sure you use that time to focus on you. Are you taking care of yourself? And are you holding yourself accountable to this strategy instead of focusing on noise and things that don't really matter for this quarter? So in your first 30 days, how do you get started? Well, you start with looking at what do you have in place? Your people, so your team, your leadership around you, the team you need to help you, and then your processes that are in place or that need to be built, and then which systems are going to enable everything that you're putting in place. So we'll start with the client. For example, when you're putting this together, do you have a self-serve strategy when you're thinking about segmentation? And if you don't, ask why. Maybe your product isn't ready. And the perfect example I'll give of this is a company I was working with had a CSM managing almost $1 million, all of their customers, and it was a Series A company. And they were very worried because they had read some book that said, no, each CSM should be able to manage over $2 million. But the product wasn't ready for that yet. It needed a lot more handholding, and they were at a place in their maturity where they needed more CSMs because they were experiencing such significant churn. So unless you're ready for self-serve, I would caution you about putting that in your 100-day plan too early in your 100-day strategy. The low touch and high touch, this is typically where executives will start. They'll start looking at, how do I build a low touch strategy at least so that I can start scaling? And then for our top clients who are willing to pay for additional customer success, hands-on white glove approach, you need to be able to write this out for your team. And again, hold each person accountable for what they're focused on building for that quarter.
So beyond just kind of thinking about, so that one client you talked about, they were just looking at, okay, the amount of revenue managed per CSM. Are there any other like top 3 or top 4 things, and maybe you get to this, but the things that help you decide, should I be A, B, or C on this? Because I think every CS leader out there is trying to figure out what is the right model. And for most companies, it's going to be a hybrid, right? I was just talking to a friend of mine this morning, and she was saying, okay, I'm building out a self-serve tech touch model, but we also have enterprise clients. And so like any kind of thoughts or frameworks that you think about to help make that decision where you should be.
Yes, and now I am wishing that I had included this slide that Paul, my partner, and I always include when we're doing an assessment with our clients, is we look at their maturity model. Where are they in their maturity of their customer success organization? And often, if you're really new to customer success, you're building your company, you might be in Series A, and you're very reactive, then it's way too early to start self-service.
Sure.
Self-service, you want to get there when you have a product that has been refined to really understand the client needs, and you have just-in-time guides. For example, I worked at WalkMe for 3 years. I'm obviously biased to that. I think it's a great platform, of any of these platforms out there that will help clients through a platform. If you have something like that in place, you can start putting more light touches or low touch strategies in place. So just really making sure you understand and testing, do some A/B testing with your clients to see, can they possibly be onboarded, for example, with webinars and with self-guided walkthroughs through the product. So we look at all of these different factors. when we're evaluating, is a client ready to move out of the high touch and more into a low touch and self-serve strategy?
In general, one of the things I find is that the best companies tend to kind of start kind of that mantra of like do things that don't scale first. So you end up kind of like starting in high touch just because that's where you're talking to your customers. You're figuring out the systems and process that you need so that you eventually build the right low touch and tech touch systems. If you go the other way, you oftentimes start building technology, but you don't actually know the system or the process. And so you don't even know what things customers need at certain stages of their life cycle. So like just if you're at a baseline, my advice typically is start with higher touch and work your way down from there. Would you
Yeah,
disagree or argue with me on that?
I love that idea because it allows you to have more touch points with your clients. That gives you an opportunity to get great product ideas from your clients as well. If you are starting with a tech touch, I think of Slack, I think of Calendly. Those are very much tech touch platforms where I've never talked to a CSM yet. I pay for the service. And they started with the tech touch. If you have a product like that, you better be investing heavily. But if you have a more complex product, higher, maybe more enterprise product, then yes, you need to start with a higher touch model.
Cool.
And I want to just end that I really am a strong advocate of really thinking about where are you in the customer's life cycle in your own maturity before you start talking about ratios. People ask me all the time, what is the right CSM to ratio? This is a made up number in a book that I'll skip mentioning. But I think this is just like the wrong ratio to look at. So now I want to move into a part of the assessment, which again is what we do in the first 30 days. I like doing it from a 1 to 5 model. And I really I start with the leadership, start assessing what kind of leadership do we need to scale the organization? Are there any metrics defined currently? What is the account management process if you have one at your organization? What about the headcount and the organizational design? Do you even have one? Does it make sense for your organization? And then this one is really important. Often when I work with companies, there are silos. They're often doing the same thing and they don't even know it. They're touching the client with the same questions unnecessarily. And so I really focus on what kind of partnership is across the organization and how do we improve that. We've already talked about segmentation and resourcing, and then the technology. Technology can be the foundation of how you scale from that high touch to low touch model. And the next one is for your, let me move forward. The next one is for your 60 days. You want to make sure that you're building, once you understand you're in your first 30 days, you've realized, okay, on a scale of 1 to 5, I have an organization I've inherited at 3.5. What am I going to build? Well, it's your people. Your people are going to help you build your organization. And you want to make sure that you're defining the right roles. And for the people who you have in your organization, maybe they need more support. Maybe they need enablement. So really understanding who are the A players on the team, why aren't the others A players? How do we get them there in the next 100 days? I want to move into the processes next, now that we've talked about the people. And this is just an example, again, the maturity model of what is your customer's journey. Even very large companies that I've worked with, and when they bring me in to do workshops, they may not have a customer journey or the tech touches along it. And so just getting on a whiteboard and talking through what happens when we're reactive versus proactive during implementation, the growing and the renewing can really help your entire team not only get aligned on what is a good customer experience, and then what happens when we're in that reactive mode. What is our risk strategy to get out of it and back into proactive? The 100 days, you really want to be talking more about the why. I started with the why have 100 days, and what are you going to build, when, and the cost. This is what your finance team, your CEO, this is what they need to see, and this is what you need to get your budget for. So really understanding by the 90 days or close to, you should really have this in place to really understand. And I find when I'm working with executives, they love seeing the big picture. So you can start with the year. You may not have Q4 here, but then you can say, this is what I'm going to accomplish in the first 100 days. I've done my assessment in the first 30. This is what we're going to sign up for. The team has agreed. And then this is what we envision for the second, third, and fourth quarter. But please note, this may change, because on day 90, we're going to look at where did we land on our initiatives in the first 100. What did we do well? What didn't we accomplish? And what do we need to change? And only then, when you spend those 10 days with your executives, with your team on self-reflection, then on day 100, you can go back to the organization and say, again, what worked well, what didn't, what needs to change. And this is what's going to go into the next 100 days. And if you build a mindset for your entire organization around this type of framework, which again, we call SCORE, then it's very simple. You start training your entire organization. Okay, we're in 100-day sprints. We break them down by month. And on day 90, we are going to spend a week really reflecting on what went well and what didn't. So defining measurements, the last piece of advice before we'll start taking questions, you really want to define the measurements for success, like I mentioned. I always say this when I'm involved in building an onboarding program for a company. I ask the clients, why did you purchase the product? And what does success look like a year from now? That allows you to start the renewal conversation at kickoff. But you should be thinking that way as well when you're defining your measurements for success with your own team. Your team, they're actually your clients as well as a leader. So you want to ask them that question, what does success look like in 30, 60, 90 days, a year from now? Because those are the questions the people who hired you as a leader, they're asking you that as well. And then the technology piece, why do you need technology? I mentioned the technology piece is the foundation. It allows your team to really understand, what are your customers doing? And what do they need more of? What part of the product isn't your customer using? And then as a leader, when I talk to leaders about, well, how are you using this technology? They need a way to manage their team, and they need a way to manage the customer experience. If they don't know that, then how can they possibly be effective, high impact leaders in your organization? And then last but not least, the technology will give your CSMs an opportunity to act in a way that is best practices for not only the team, but also for the client. And this woman I'm coaching, she's in month 2 of her role. And she said to me, Emilia, we don't have a playbook. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to organize my day. So if you have technology and a playbook that you're building in your first 100 days, you can really give your team actionable insights into how can they really plan their week and their day to be effective. Because no one wants to end a week and leave on a Friday saying, wow, that was just a whirlwind week. I'm just so glad it's over. I'm dreading Monday. They want to know, this is what I planned on Sunday night, and I got so much accomplished. I touched customers. I helped close renewals. Those are the kind of feelings you want to leave your team with as a high impact leader. And if you start with this 100-day plan, then you can really focus on the next quarter. So as a final thought for all of you, I'd love to say, no matter how great your plan is, really make sure you're working on it on a regular cadence, reflecting on it, because plans aren't helpful. Just like your NPS score, it's not helpful unless you actually hold yourself accountable and do something with it. So with that, Mark, I think we'll take some Q&A.
Cool. Yeah. So other questions, we've got 4 or 5 to start with, and other questions that come up, please pop them in the chat pane. We'll go. We have technically blocked to the top of the hour, but we'll go kind of as long as the questions come. Your last point there actually feeds really nicely, I think, into Brody's first question. And it's funny, I find that every time we do one of these webinars, we get a version of Brody's question, and it's all about the buy-in. So his question is, our struggle is getting buy-in at the executive level to drive forward customer success specific initiatives. So is there a best way to position the ROI of things like setting up, internal data structures, investing in more robust customer success? Like, I guess for you, Emilia, like, how do you start that conversation? How do you think about the ROI, or how do you position the ROI of those discussions? Maybe just kind of unpack that a little bit more and how you help clients and think through that.
Yeah, so as a leader, I think it's really important to understand the company's bigger vision and mission. And once you have that in place, you can start thinking about, okay, what do I really need to put in my strategy? And where are we going to fit in? And so I think it's really important to just start with the bigger picture and then really understanding the client needs. If you start with that, and you have to actually, I don't know how else you can go to your head of finance and say, I need to hire 10 CSMs, unless you've built a business case around it. You always want to go back to the company's vision and the values and how you're going to fit in. The other piece I'll say is measurement. What does success look like at the end of the 90 or 100 days? If you're able to tell them, hey, here's our goal. And in fact, we even have a stretch goal. A lot of companies like putting a stretch goal in place. That will get your finance team really excited about, okay, this is why we're making this investment. Here are the expected outcomes.
Makes sense. And I guess probably about 4 or 5 months ago, we actually had a session with Mark Bissell, another well-known kind of customer success leader. And his whole session was on, how do you get buy-in to these initiatives? And one of the points that he made that's really stuck with me is so often that when customer success leaders or CSMs are trying to drive forward some customer success specific initiative, they use CS language. They don't use the language that a CFO or a CEO speaks. And sometimes it's just almost the nuance of being able to talk about how this thing will actually impact not adoption metrics, not these other metrics that we talk about so often in customer success. This is how it's going to impact revenue. This is how it's going to impact profitability. And, back to your point of understanding the entire company framework, the entire company vision, also understanding just the people that you need to sign off on your thing. What's that thing that really matters to them? And making sure that whatever initiative you're trying to push forward is in that context.
Yeah, especially once you get to the C-level, you better understand the metrics behind any organization. And that means sitting down with your CFO, asking her to spend 30 minutes or an hour walking you through what is important from a financial perspective and really understanding the language they speak. Their CFOs are probably not going to learn your language. They don't understand all of the jargon we use. You probably have no interest in understanding all of their deep insights in platforms they use. But you have to have a common ground around goals that you can both align with. If you want us to achieve a 95% net retention rate, and this is my current team, and this is the current ratio, this is how much we're spending on clients, and this is what we need to get there, you need to explain it, and you need to have stories, case studies. There is no excuse why you can't go find some stories on net retention rate, articles on it. If you attended any of the SaaStr events, which I know ClientSuccess always sponsors, those are great events and recorded sessions that you can go listen to really understand what do CFOs care about, how do you speak their language, and then how do you keep them updated on a regular cadence so that they are continually supporting you as you're growing your organization.
Awesome. The next question I want to jump to, so class asks a question kind of about like the framework and when you're doing your reflection. So his question is, with the 100-day sprints, when you do a reflection at day 90, wouldn't you have forgotten about what it was like 60 or more days ago? So is the reflecting at day 90, is that too far into, is that too late? Have you already forgotten what you remembered at day 30? Like, what's your thought process there?
Yeah, so I think you should do it on day 100. And I don't think it's just you do it on day 100. Like with the last team I was leading, we reflected on it as a team every Thursday. We pulled it up in our at the time we were using a Confluence page for our sprint, and we pulled it up. Everyone was responsible for updating where they were, and then on Fridays I would update the whole organization. So you can't forget, it's all in documented somewhere. You should absolutely have your framework documented and be looking at it minimum once a week. But I would say you should be starting your Monday. What is my mission? How am I planning my week? And then on Friday, reflecting on it. Where did I get to on the plan? And what am I going to set myself up for to achieve next week? If you look at it that way, once day 90 closes, the quarter's done, you can look at the metrics, then you have a whole week to work with your team on how are we going to present this to the whole organization in a way that they understand, and then what are we going to do for the next quarter. So that's what those 10 days are about. Not enough companies reflect, and you need reflection and learning before you start building something else. Otherwise you find yourself in a rat race.
I just find what I like about it is you're so deliberate about, you kind of have the two different mindsets. You have the planning mindset and you have the executing mindset, and they're different, right? They require different skill set, different mindset, but you got time blocked out for each of them. And without, planning, all you're doing is executing. And that is what oftentimes I find results in, oh, we're just working for the sake of working. We don't really know why we're working. But if all you do is plan, you never actually get anything done. So I really like the framework because it helps kind of bridge both of those. Let me see here. The next let's see. So Emily asks a question. A few of these are a little bit more tactical questions, which I think is totally okay. Her question is, how do you go about setting shorter term goals? If we have an 80% renewal goal and there's a very specific time of year when the renewals occur, how do we go about setting goals for 30, 60, 90 days? So it's like, we only know if the renewal's out 6 months and I'm setting a 100-day plan, I don't actually know whether my renewal rate increased on that account. How do you think about kind of the shorter term milestones in the middle?
Yeah. Well, I mentioned earlier that I like to ask during a kickoff call, what does success look like in a year from now? And then getting the client to agree to 3 goals we want to achieve over the course of, let's say, a quarter. And if you know those goals, by month 6, you should absolutely be setting up an executive business review with the client to let them know what's going really well, where are you on achieving those goals, so that the renewal that's 6 months out is no surprise. If something's wrong at month 6, you already know. You have 6 months to fix it. So I think it's at 6 months, you should absolutely be having that executive business review so that your customer success platform, you know exactly, are they planning to renew in 6 months? That's when you start the conversation. I argue it's on the kickoff, but if you miss those key questions, you can't have a meaningful executive business review at month 6.
So what do you do when you ask what does success look like in a year from now? and you get a mediocre answer, a wishy-washy answer. We haven't really thought about it. Or the other version of it, which is, "Oh, I don't know, Joe bought this. I'm just the one implementing it. Like, I don't know what success looks like. I'm just the one using it," right? How do you think through that? Are there any kind of playbooks, processes you think through there?
Yeah, so this really takes everyone creating a Slack channel for your team enablement, practicing doing role plays. We do this with our clients. We do role plays where we talk about, okay, well, what happens if a client says, I haven't thought about it, or I have no idea what your product does. I'm just the project manager and I've been told to implement this.
Mhm.
As a customer success manager, it is your job to educate the client. So if they don't know what the platform does, take the time to either invite them to a training session, or at least you should be able in 5 minutes to give them, well, our platform is going to make you more efficient, reduce support costs, whatever it is. It's
Mhm.
almost like you're doing a mini resell
Yep.
if the person's hearing about your platform for the first time. And then if they don't know, as a CSM, your job is to lead the client. You have stories about all the other clients you've worked with. And if you're new at the company, go read all the case studies on the website. Learn what makes a great client successful, and then educate that client on what does success look like and lead them through that journey. There is no excuse for your customer success platform to have blanks for goals for the client. You need to have goals for the client that are measurable so that you can be working in partnership to achieve them.
I'm so glad that you mentioned that, like, in a lot of cases there does involve a resell, a re-education, because so many things happen. You think about the amount of companies that bought something in January or February of last year, then the world goes crazy. They completely forget about everything that they bought in January or February. They're finally coming back up for air in June or July, and you have to go back and re-educate on everything that the reason that they bought you. And there's probably new players in place, so you're going back extremely, like, all the way back to square one. And so that idea of having that framework of, there's some times where I've got to not only resell but continually sell, because all sorts of things happen. So
And Mark,
with you on that.
I'll just add one more thing. If something like COVID happens or a big event for the company, you almost do not only have to resell, but you have to start with questions. Ask the client about, where are you right now? Have your business goals changed, and how? How can we fit into these new goals? So it's really taking a step back and doing a reevaluation. I think all of us did that in June, right? We realized, oh, COVID's not going away anytime soon. Whatever was valid March 1st is no longer valid June 1st. We need a reset. So you need to do that instead of forcing goals down their throats that just are so irrelevant.
It makes so much sense, because I think what a lot of CSMs, and I saw this happen, is they didn't come in with a, let's understand how the world has changed for you. They kind of just did the standard, oh, I'm just checking in. Haven't heard from you in 6 weeks. Haven't heard from you in 8 weeks. And that doesn't lead to a good conversation in June or July. That just leads to this person just keeps hounding me to have a conversation. Okay, cool. There's a bunch of new questions in here. So I'm going to jump to Serena's question. So she said, I like the insight regarding not being ready for self-service. So what are some markers that customer success can look at to determine when you are ready to scale self-service?
Yeah, so building a customer success journey, for example, and all the touch points that you have with a client is really the first step. Understanding how much time is a CSM spending on each call, for example, and what are they discussing. Each call should have an agenda. So building that customer journey and seeing, all right, well, the CSM early in a customer maturity model might be doing training for every single customer because they don't have a training team yet. If you're finding that you're doing so many of the same training sessions, it's time to start thinking about how can we automate some of this, put it right in the platform for them to access on demand in the moment they need it. Because as human beings, we forget everything we've heard on this webinar today in 30 days from now, except maybe 5%. So what do? We have to practice it, and we have to access the information when we need it. And that's what you have to think about when you're building a low touch, high tech touch model, is throughout the customer journey, what can we automate? And then start testing it. Don't just roll out a program. Start testing it. Start testing it with some clients. I think that's really the first step in more automation.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. I mean, you're kind of looking at what are the things I'm already doing on repeat. And the other one that I always find is like just looking at my FAQs. What are the questions that I get constantly? And so how can I more proactively answer those? What I find interesting about your idea about the testing is sometimes you're testing the message, sometimes you're testing the method. So sometimes it's, when at this point in the customer journey, when this happens, I should maybe send an email, or maybe I should schedule a call, or maybe I should have an in-app chat pop up, or some combination of all of those, or sending. I've even seen some people say at this point we send a physical thing to their office, or something like that, when people still worked in offices and that was a thing. But no, I really like what you said there. There was one point in there where you talked about maturity, and there was a maturity question here from Anna that I thought was interesting. So she says, what if the company's vision is scattered and with very little delivery? How can I help my team feel clarity, ownership, and pride in what they do, other than just go and answer tickets or hold training sessions? They kind of sound like they have a bit of a conveyor belt like outlook. Like, how do I help them come up and think more about this thing I'm doing is contributing to something larger than just answering tickets?
So a lot of the companies I work with, they don't have a framework for the entire organization. They don't have a North Star for the more of the startups I work with. What I would say is do not wait for your organization to create one. When I work with these clients, I just go in and create it for them. I get the CEO to sign off on it, and then they may tweak it for the larger organization, and I'll build it for my team that I'm leading. I did that with WalkMe. I built the vision and the values, and I put it in place. I got the team to buy into it. And then when you're having a conversation with someone on your team, with a colleague, it's not about the person or that you disagree. It doesn't have to be a friction point. It can be, look, at the beginning of the 100 days, we agreed that this is our North Star. This is our one goal we want to achieve. These are the values we're going to hold ourselves accountable to. I'm having a challenge with this particular situation, and you go into it in a very business-like way where it's not about offending the person or getting into a friction conversation. It's about, there's an issue. We're holding ourselves accountable to this goal. How do we get past it so we can keep working together towards that North Star? And I think that's my one major key takeaway for leaders. You don't need a CEO or an organization to build your model. You need to build it. So start, and then people will start saying, hey, can I do that for my team too? I really like what's happening. I like the energy that's being created in your team.
Yeah, I find it's helpful if the folks above you have, a mission vision that you can tap into, but it by no means, stops you from doing it. Like every team I've been a part of, we've got a mission, we've got a vision, we've got, a team name or a team motto or, stuff like that, you can do regardless of whether your executive team has done anything on that. Jake has an interesting tactical question about the high touch, low touch. So he says, what are the risks, if any, in moving from a high touch to a low touch model as the product matures and doesn't require as much engagement from a CSM?
Oh, there's so many risks. That's why product absolutely needs to be part of this program. And you need to be measuring. There are just so many platforms out there that can show you the hot spots of where is the client getting stuck, what do we need to improve. You should be surveying your clients, understanding what went well with the new experience, what didn't. And then only once you have buy-in, you need to proactively educate your team on the changes in the customer support model or the customer success model. If you just spring it on someone and there's changes and suddenly they can't contact their CSM, you're destined for churn. So it has to be a proactive, thoughtful approach with any of these major changes that you're making. And for an organization that's growing at scale, you probably always, and I think of Cisco, I don't know, maybe 85% of their business is all through channel partners, but they reserve CSMs for that 15% of the high touch. Salesforce has done the same thing. They laid off so many CSMs this year and said, you have to spend a certain amount of money to get a CSM. Okay, well, how are the others helping themselves? They have all these different channels before they made that announcement.
Interesting. So Tom asked a question here that's I think probably companies that are a little bit further along, maybe in Cisco's bucket. So he says, we have 30 plus products. Some are pretty complicated. We don't have time to, have an onboarding CSM for all of our products, not even our top 10 products. So is it wise to then have a CSM per product or per group of products, which would result in maybe a customer with multiple CSMs? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, oh, that's a pretty big question, and I have there's no one answer. I think it starts with the sales to customer success handoff and understanding, why did this client purchase the product? What is their main pain point, and what are they expecting as their first key milestone event? So really understanding why are they a customer? If you have 30 products, I doubt they purchased 30 at once. They may have said, let's try 1 or 3 or something. So you want to make sure you understand their pain point. You want to show high value early in the experience, and you want to ensure that they're adopting those platforms. Once you have that executive business review to sign off that they're up and running, they've adopted the platform, then you can ask them about the next pain points and educate them on your other products. There's nothing worse than having an onboarding of every single bell and whistle that your platform has when I don't really care about it. I just care, I have to look like a hero to my organization. I need this platform up and I need to be able to report out of it. The rest, let's talk about it another time. I'm not even listening.
Yep.
So that's my advice. Yes, you should have product experts, but it's really odd to have 30 CSMs. You should have one central person who guides the relationship, and bring in experts. If you're a larger organization, you probably have an enablement training program for your customers. Put them through that, get them certified, get them talking about your product. But I think it's a little odd to have more than one central person who that client can go to, with the exception of support. They need to be educated. Go to support for technical issues. I am your central person when it comes to adoption and enabling you to be successful.
So to use kind of a football term, I've got a quarterback, and then I've got other folks that I'll bring in as needed. The one thing that I find that a lot of companies think about, and I just see them screw up, and I've screwed this up myself, which is we think internally. We think, what's the best way for us to operate, to build the best operations, to build the best cost efficiencies. And we forget to actually just like ask the customer, like, okay, we have 30 products that you've bought from us. We have 10 products that you bought from us. Like, what's your preference? Would you rather work with subject matter experts, or would you rather work with one person who knows a little bit about 5 things, right? And that oftentimes leads to some interesting insights. So we've got 5 minutes left. now that I'm looking at it, we're definitely not going to get to everything. But if there's any last questions, maybe let me see here. We've got Elisa's question. I guess maybe I'll ask this one question here, and then like if there's any just last words that you want to share with anyone, Emilia, before we wrap up. So this question is just, can you use this framework, the 100-day framework, if you're building your CS team from scratch? And if so, like, help us understand that. I assume your answer is yes, but
Yeah.
I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, absolutely. So I do coach leaders who are building a team from scratch. They are the team. And now they now have to hire someone. So I think first, how do you get great talent? Well, you show them that you're organized, you have a vision, you have a strategy. So of course you should have this in place. And again, it's to hold yourself accountable, to focus you, to help your executive team be aligned behind what you're doing. I think that's really important. So the strategy that you put in place will help you achieve your goal. It also will help you tell a story. We're humans, we love storytelling. If you have a strategy in place, you can sell your vision to great talent, to your organization, to your customers. And that takes a communication strategy. So that's part of the score. How are you going to communicate this to your organization and to your clients? How will it help them? So remember, your strategy is achieving your goals, but it's about enabling others. As a servant leader, put that at the top. The operationalizing is important. If you don't have a strategy to operationalize everything you're doing, you're going to burn out so fast, and then you will become an ineffective leader. It will help you build relationships. They'll see you as someone who's got themselves together, who is focused, and then you're able to execute faster when you have a strategy in place. And again, that's why we built this score one-page program.
Awesome. Really appreciate it. I learned a ton about maturity models, about getting buy-in around obviously the 100-day plan. And so I think everybody else will echo that, this has been a great session. They've learned a ton. I will, just to reiterate, we'll send out the recording, we'll send out the slides. So if there's part you missed, we'll get that to you. Emilia, any final words of advice, any final calls to action, anywhere you want to point folks before we wrap up?
Yeah, I think the two things I'll say is any strategy starts with you. Make sure you're focused. Make sure you take care of yourself. If you're running around frazzled, you don't have a strategy in place, a framework, a playbook, how can you enable your team as a strong leader? They're looking to you to be calm and to lead the team. And that takes having great leadership communication skills. That takes processes, hence the framework. And then that takes technology to really help you scale as an organization.
Awesome. Well, like I said, I learned a ton on that last one. I'll just put a plug in. If anybody wants to talk about customer success technology, I'm more than willing to have a chat, but I learned a ton. Really appreciate you taking the time, Amelia. And we'll leave it there. So